All right, you tell me if this thing is coming at me. Welcome back to the Backcountry Manifesto podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Sharedport. I'm your buddy out west, Hayden Samak, and today on the show, I'm dodging cattle. We forgot to record the intro, so now we're in South Dakota recording this intro. Producer Andrew, thank you, man. Today on the show, we're going to talk to Tom Rosenbauer. Tom is he's like kind of like the face of fly fishing at Orvis. Chances are, if you go to YouTube and you look up a video how to fly fish, you will see Tom Rosenbauer. He's the host of the Orvis Fly Fishing Guide podcast, or formerly known, now it's the Orvis Fly Fishing Podcast. It's been going for 15 years. He answers your questions. I'm real nervous about that bull. And today we're telling you everything you need to know about getting into fly fishing. It's a cool thing. It's an approachable thing. And shocking to a lot of people, that's nice. It isn't that hard. So, without further ado, our interview with the man himself, Tom Rosenbauer.
You know, I always start these things like the same way. You know, it's like, oh, hey, how are you? But we've been hanging out. We've been hanging out for the last couple of days, man. It's been awesome to have you in town.
Well, it's been it's been fun fishing with you, and we had an interesting dinner last night, which is a long story that we won't go into, but it was sure fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can put it like this. And this is not made up. We have a photo right here. I woke up to a German tattoo artist knocking at my door.
Yeah, that's a long story.
Yeah, so take from that what you will. Happy birthday, Tom.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was your birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you as Tom Rosenbauer. I've often referenced your podcast as the dulcet tones of Tommy R. You host the Orvis Fly Fishing podcast.
Yeah.
Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing, which is a wildly popular podcast. I mean, and so in a long running podcast.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first.
Yeah.
If not the first. And it's been going on for, 15 years or so.
It's wild. You've been working for Orvis a lot longer than that. Could you just like real quickly give us like the 3,000 foot overview of like your career in fly fishing at Orvis?
Yeah, well, I applied to Orvis for the job. They basically needed a warm body to work in the retail store and somebody that knew, a few things about fly fishing. And I was horrible in the retail store. It wasn't what I thought. I wasn't meeting famous fly fishers. I was, helping people measure inseams on their chinos and all kinds of really boring things. And I didn't last long there, but luckily there was an opening in the fishing school. Orvis has had fishing schools since the late 60s.
Yeah.
And so I got to be an instructor there and in the shooting school. And then I started working in customer service during the wintertime. And then I was asked to edit the Orvis News, which was the publication that I read and answered the job description in, and did that. And then I did public relations and product development, and so it's a great place to advance from within.
Sure.
And so over 50 years, I've done lots of different things. And now I'm pretty lucky now. I kind of just do podcasts and make videos, and there's a little office work and a few spreadsheets I have to deal with.
Hosted trips.
Pardon me?
Hosted trips.
Hosted trips, yeah. I really enjoy those, taking people to places like Chile and Argentina and Bahamas.
And anybody, as long as there's room, anybody can sign up for one of those, right?
Yeah, they're not cheap.
Yeah, well, hey, look, if you got a whole bunch of money and you want to go somewhere crazy to go fishing, we're going to put the link just in the description. I don't know. Maybe that'll hit with somebody.
Yeah. But I enjoy that. I really enjoy taking care of people and making sure they have a good day. And,
You get to do a bunch of fishing too.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't host a trip if I didn't fish every day.
Yeah.
No way.
So April, Montana, killer time to be doing a little bit of fishing before runoff. And that's what we're talking about today, fly fishing.
Right. Fly fishing.
And specifically that fly fishing is not that hard.
Yeah, it's not that hard, and then it is hard. But it depends on how you wanna approach it. I mean, it's just another way of sticking a hook in a fish's mouth, right? So it's fishing. It's fishing. You use a lure, and you have a line, and you have a rod, and you torture them for a few minutes, and then you bring them in, and you either eat them or release them.
Yeah.
So it's just another way of fishing, and people describe it as an art. People who have never done it don't really know anything, and they always do this. Yeah, it's like this art. It's like this art.
Shadow casting.
Yeah, and it's not an art. I don't even know if it's a sport. I don't know what to call it. But it's I mean, you got to be in some ways a predator, and I think it's more intimate than other kinds of fishing because it's less mechanical. You're doing more stuff with your hands all the time. You're always moving. I mean, it's not sitting on a bank, waiting for a fish to bite. So people that are ADD or, have a lot of energy, enjoy fly fishing because there's always something going on and
it's perpetually active.
Perpetually active, yeah. And they talk about fly fishing actually as being a really great therapy for people to kind of lose their problems for a while and chill because you really can't think of anything else. I mean, it's a cliche, right?
Sure.
If you're in the fly fishing world, it's a cliche, but you can't think of anything else. You're always concentrating and you're constantly looking, you're hunting, there's a lot of aspects of hunting in fly fishing because you're stalking fish most of the time. Sometimes you're even seeing them in the water. Sometimes you aren't.
We did some of that yesterday. A little bit of sight fishing yesterday.
Yeah.
Would you say that? So I guess kind of what you're saying is that it gets put on this pedestal that there's some things of it that are like certainly worthy of that. For instance, therapeutic effects. There is like a certain amount of poetry in it. You are like kind of arts and crafts on the flies a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, I mean, there have been a lot of really amazing books where fly fishing is sort of it's not really a plot, but it's like a setting almost. The one that everybody's most familiar with is River Runs Through It, right?
Yeah.
And could you explain shadow casting for us just real quick?
Yeah, shadow casting doesn't exist. It's something that Norman McLean invented for the movie, and it's. I mean, it's not anything anybody uses or anybody even knows how to do.
I could see it being useful for caddis flies, but you are like the I would consider you the front man of Orvis. Like you're the dude who, when you're watching an Orvis video, unless it's like a Pete Kutzer like casting video, instruction video, they're probably watching you. You and some of your friends, we were talking about the new fly fisher and all those folks. You kind of would have a vested interest in making it seem sort of like this mystic, like special, really hard thing. Not you, but some people like you. They would like to do that for their ego is what I'm saying.
And people overcomplicate it.
Right.
People make it purposely complicated in certain aspects. And that's fine because, the human brain is, we're hardwired to embrace complexity and problem solving. And so I think that some people do make it that difficult because they enjoy it. They enjoy the challenge. They enjoy the intellectual and the physical challenges of it. But it doesn't have to be. And fly fishing has a reputation for being exclusive and expensive. And I think that, first of all, you got to back up a bit in history. Fly fishing originally was the sport of the English gentry, right, or the European gentry. That's where it started. That's where people started fly fishing. They weren't doing it for food. I mean, rarely were they doing it for food. They were doing it for sport. And it's become much more inclusive over the past, I don't know, I would say 20, 30 years. Women never used to be involved there were some women involved in fly fishing, but not many. And lots more women. Young people, you never saw someone your age passionate about fly fishing. It was all old white guys and with their private clubs and all that stuff. And it's really changed. The amount of young people in fly fishing now is just amazing, and it's so cool to see. I think it's the most exciting time to be in fly fishing because people realize, it's not snobby, it's not exclusive, it's just fun, just plain fun.
So you think a lot of that mental barrier to entry is totally unwarranted?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a artifact, a kind of a sociological artifact of fly fishing. Sometimes it's hard to get beyond those stereotypes that are culturally embedded.
Sure.
And so, and people that have tried it, and people when they see other people that look like them, maybe they're not white, maybe they're not old, and they see other people doing it. Videos have been I think a big help. Fly fishing videos
for sure
have been a big help because most of the people doing them are young people, right?
Right.
And I think that's really gotten a lot of young people into fly fishing.
Yeah. So again, what we have you on to talk about is a beginner's look at fly fishing. We're going to go through the gear. We're going to talk about the flies.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the fish. We're going to talk about some opportunities that might surprise people, maybe like urban, fisheries like carp or when the stripers get into some of those spots. I mean, you can even fish for steelhead, which is like one of the, for you guys who may not know, it's like one of the, a lot of people say the pinnacle, you hear like steelhead, you hear permit, it's kind of like
Atlantic salmon.
It's in that echelon.
Very rarefied.
Yeah, and you can fish for those like in downtown Milwaukee, can't you?
You can.
Okay,
downtown Grand Rapids, and
awesome. Well, let's get started. This is going to be what we call the Andy Cam heavy episode. We're going to be showing a lot of this stuff.
Well, let's start with the cost. Let's start with the cost issue.
Oh, I like
Let's
this.
start with that first. Okay?
Because that's another significant barrier to entry, at least mentally for a lot of people.
People say fly fishing it's so expensive. And if you buy a top of the line rod and reel and you go to Argentina a couple times a year, it's going to be expensive. But it doesn't have to be. You can totally outfit yourself with a really good fly fishing outfit, everything you need for less than the price of a smartphone. So, and considerably less in some respects. So it's I don't think it's expensive. Part of the issue is that if you want an American-made fly fishing outfit, and there are a number of companies that make reels and rods and lines here in the United States, and our labor costs are higher.
Sure.
And those can be expensive, over $1,000 for a fishing rod. However, you can also go the route. There are some really good rods being brought in from Asia where they're mass produced, more or less. Their labor costs are lower. So you can get a good fly rod and reel for, $200-ish.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is not something we discussed earlier. This is like something that I have said for years now. That Clearwater setup, killer.
Yeah.
Killer setup.
Yeah.
Very affordable.
Yeah.
Comes with a line, comes with a reel, comes with a leader, I think, even with it.
Yep. Yeah. So you need a box of flies, and if you're just going to go fish bluegills in a park somewhere, you got everything you need. put everything in your pocket and go.
Yeah. Yeah. So crazy. The idea that you got to be money bags to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just not true.
That's not true. No, that's not true. Still in a lot of people's minds, it still has that aura of being expensive, but it's not.
Yeah. I like this line of questioning. Do you think that there are any other big misconceptions? And I have one if you don't, that people make when they imagine themselves getting into fly fishing.
Well, there's a lot of them. There's a lot. One is that we say the lures that we use are called flies, right? But they can imitate frogs and bait fish and crayfish and pieces of seaweed. You can create flies that imitate all kinds of stuff that fish eat. So you're not just whipping these little insect imitations back and forth. The other thing, I talk to people all the time and they say, yeah, I don't fish that much because, the nearest trout stream is 300 miles away. And I'm thinking, what? You got stuff in your backyard that you can go fishing for on your lunch hour, after work, before work. Urban fly fishing is becoming a thing, and I love it. Yeah. Of course, I live in the country. I live in dairy farm country. So to me, urban fly fishing is a novelty. And I really like, getting in grittier parts of cities and fishing for bass and carp and sometimes even trout. You can catch trout in downtown Denver.
Huh. Okay, cool. So we've covered the big misconceptions.
Yeah.
Say somebody is putting together, they want to go fishing.
Yep.
What are the absolute essentials? Just in list form. I don't need to go into what each one is.
Yeah. Well, you need a rod and reel and a line, right? And a leader. And you want some spools of that tippet material because you're probably going to have to change that. And a box of flies. And, if in some circumstances, that's all you need.
Yeah.
If you're trout fishing, you may want some strike indicators. You're probably going to want some fly floating to keep your dry flies floating. And a pair of snips. Snips are, there's one specifically made for fly fishing, and they will cut the ends of your line cleanly, makes it easier to thread your fly. And also you want to trim the tag ends of those knots really close. So a good pair of snips. I use my teeth often, and you should, because it's not as precise and
it kind of flattens.
It's not good for your teeth. But I still will bite, fishing line.
Oh, I do it all the time. My one of my best friends here is also my dentist.
Yeah.
And it drives him crazy. And one time I asked him, we were doing some work on my teeth, and I asked him if he would kind of sharpen just a little spot.
Yeah, my dentist has offered to do that just to scare me.
Dude, he was appalled that I asked him that.
Because it wears the enamel. I was not good. It's not good.
That's fine. That's fine.
And another thing is you don't necessarily need to burden yourself with waders or a fishing vest.
Sure.
A lot of times you can put it all in your pocket, and things are warming up. And, once you get past June in most parts of the country, or even April in the South, you don't need waders. You can do what's called wading wet. And you wear a pair of wading shoes if the rocks are slippery.
Tennis boots.
Old tennis shoes. And a pair of quick dry pants. Don't wear cotton.
Yep.
Pair of nylon or polyester pants because they'll dry quickly. And you don't need to burden yourself with all this gear at first. You will eventually want to get more gear.
You'll geek out.
But you'll geek out. But don't start out with burdening yourself with all this junk.
Would you say a good pair of polarized lenses is important?
I think that's essential. And of course, they're useful. You use them, when you're at the beach or driving or whatever as well.
What about a net?
Yeah, nets are good.
But if you're going to get a net, you want one of the rubberized.
Yeah, you want to get and most fly fishing nets these days are rubber, because the old nylon and polyester net bags, they can split the fins on fish and rub the protective slime off their body. So you want a rubber rubberized net bag.
Oh, dude. I mean, up in like the Salmon River and like Pulaski and stuff like that, you see all the time. You'll catch a steelhead and it'll have like a checker pattern on it.
Yeah.
Because somebody netting being just a heavy fish, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, nets. If you're fishing for like bluegills or small trout, you don't really need a net, but the net's handy.
Hey guys, this is Ad Hayden coming to you, or I guess semi-Ad Hayden. We had a whole bunch of ad copy written up, but I don't think I need it for this product. I just want to tell you about something that I like genuinely. That's sharedpour.com. Sharedpour.com is the place to go, in my humble opinion, if you're looking for hard-to-find bourbons, allocated whiskeys. I know that those two are sometimes the same thing. Or just spirits in general. I've been using them since way before we even considered being partners with him. Actually, since before, Andrew, I think, when did we start recording episodes for this? Yeah, like since before we recorded the first episode of Backcountry Manifesto. And here's the receipts to prove it. You see this bottle of Mammoth from our bourbon? That's a single barrel select right there. Now check this out. Here, wait, you can hear it too if you're listening. Right, is that gonna be in frame, Andrew? Okay, well right here, I don't know. There's my receipt from March of 2024. I really do use these people. I believe in like them as a company. They're great folks. Now, if you're 21 or older, that is very important. If you're a minor, pay no attention to this advertisement. And you live in the United States, sharedpour.com will ship liquor straight to your doorstep. You'll need a signature, but they'll do it with flat rate shipping, which is really helpful if you're ordering a couple bottles. That way you don't pay out the nose through shipping. You could order like 10, 15 bottles. I don't know, maybe Craig, don't get mad at me. And they will ship for the same price as one. The other thing is that they're customer service experts. If you call them, should you have a problem with your order, and you won't, you will get a person who actually works there answering the phone and making the issue right. They have the best selection, whether it's a single barrel pick, again, a hard to find allocated bourbon, or even your daily sipper. You should check out sharedpour.com. And right now, and that is ad speak, you can use code BACKCOUNTRY, okay? That's Backcountry, all one word, all caps. I think that's important. That's what they were texting me and telling me was important. You will get 10% off your entire purchase at sharedpour.com. Go check them out. You'll like them as much as I do. You'll get a bunch of cool whiskey. You'll impress your friends. You'll annoy your spouse. And you'll have some great spirits. Backcountry for 10% off your order at sharedpour.com.
Now let's start talking about the gear. What do you want to start with? Should we start with the fly rod?
I think we should start with the fly line because that's what's most different.
Okay, great.
Yeah, let's show one on a reel, actually.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull this off of here if I can. Oh, sorry, Boone.
Well, that's a leader.
Yeah, that's the one I used yesterday.
Oh.
So fly line is thick. It's got mass. It's got weight, okay? Because you're throwing something that has virtually no weight.
That being the fly.
The fly. Yeah, the lure that you're using, you couldn't cast with a spinning rod or a bait casting rod. You couldn't do it. It wouldn't go very far because with a lure or with bait, you're throwing a mass out there and the line just follows along. Right?
Yeah.
The line follows the arc of whatever you're casting. In fly fishing, you're casting a weighted line and it might float and it might sink, but it's got mass. And this is the thing that drives the fly to the target. So yeah, you got a lure there. That's got some weight to it.
That'll go.
Go.
It's like I could throw this at Andrew. Oh,
yeah.
I might have thrown that at Andrew. I could throw it at Andrew and it goes.
Yeah.
I try and whip a fly at Andrew.
It doesn't go very far.
I kind of softballed that one.
Yeah.
But,
It's light. It's light and it's air resistant. So So you have this weighted line. It has some taper to it that makes it cast better, so it's thicker in the middle and thinner toward the end. And then you have a tapered leader, which is fishing line. It's basically, here's your fishing line. So it's clear, it's flexible, and it's less noticeable. I mean, you theoretically could tie a fly onto the end of this line, but it wouldn't look very natural.
Right. Well, and that's like the classic beginner fly shop question. They go, well, I bought all this, but I can't figure out how to get the fly onto the line.
I've never heard that one.
Oh, dude, I've seen it happen one time. It was in a Cabela's actually, in like the little White River fly shop thing that they have. Yeah. And some person was like, okay, well, like, the eye of the hook is this big, but the diameter of the line's like that big. Like, I was like, that's pretty funny. And then the guy explained leaders. But that was one thing that totally messed me up for a long time was explain the leader a little bit. Because I think that's...
well, it's tapered because when you're casting, the line is tapered, the rod is tapered, everything's tapered so that the fly goes out there and straightens above the water and then lands relatively delicately on the water or just lands in a straight line, right? So the taper helps dissipate that energy that you're building up when you're casting, and it makes it land lighter, and then it's thinner. It gets, these are machine tapered, so it's thick, probably hard to see on camera, but it's fairly thick here. It's like 20 thousandths of an inch.
Yeah.
And then it tapers down gradually to, somewhere around 7 thousandths of an inch, depending on what fly you have and what you're fishing for.
Yeah. And if people are like, gear fishermen, spin fishermen, they can think about it like the ass end of that leader is about like, probably like 30 pound.
30 to, well, more like 50 pound.
Yeah. But then the end of it is.
The end of it is more like 4 or 5 pounds.
Right.
Yeah. So it's, this is your flexible, relatively invisible connection to the fly. So it looks natural. But because you are throwing this line with mass, the rods are different and the casting motions are different. Mm-hmm. And probably the biggest barrier to getting into fly fishing is the casting.
Which also is not that hard. To do it really well, it's hard.
To do it really
serviceably.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for over 60 years, and I'm still working on my casting. So you're never gonna.
I suck as a caster.
You never. You're a good caster. You're never gonna be a perfect caster. But to be functional and to go out and have fun, couple hours of practice.
Pete Kutzer's really close to be the perfect caster. I think
pretty close. Pretty close. But it's it's muscle memory. It's like any other sport. I mean, you can't just pick up a bowling ball and roll it down the lane and expect to have a strike. You can't go out and play even pickleball without developing a little muscle memory. Sure. So, and it's a different casting motion than spin casting or bait casting. But that's all. You've got to keep this line aerialized and there are lots of little tricks in fly casting, and a good either a good instructor taking a class. Orvis offers free classes on Saturday mornings at our stores, and a lot of our dealers do. And then there's some really good videos.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Orvis Learning Center.
The Orvis Learning Center. There's no ads. It's free. There's no ads. It's curated, so it goes step by step, and it's mostly video based. There's some articles in there, and there's animated knots. Knots. The fly fishing knots really intimidate people, but there's only a couple knots you need to learn. And again, it's just muscle memory.
I used to use the clinch knot for everything to the point that when I needed to connect my tippet to a leader, I would just tie 2 clinch knots together.
Yeah. Well, it's a blood knot. Right. 2 clinch knots is a blood knot.
Right.
Yeah, but and there are lots of knots. There are lots of knots that work and are good, but people shouldn't get intimidated by it. They should learn a knot to tie a couple pieces of this leader material together, and they should learn a knot to tie on their fly, and you're done.
Yep.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Unless you really get geeky about things.
Yeah, that's not me. That's on me. That doesn't have to be you either.
And the other, another thing we haven't mentioned, but we should, is that fly fishers tend to get more in tune with their environment because they have to. Because you're trying to feed that fish a fake bug or mouse or minnow or whatever, and trick it into eating this silly little fly that you have out there. So you have to understand the fish's behavior and their environment, where they live in a lake or a stream. And you have to be observant. So, you're always looking at bugs and birds, and sometimes we lose sight of the scenery because we get so obsessed with fishing, man. I had to stop yesterday. I had to stop and turn around and look at those incredible snow-covered mountains, because if I didn't think about it, I would be focused, hyper-focused all day long.
Dude, the call it Paradise Valley for a reason.
Yeah. And then the other thing, that Orvis is family-owned, and the owners are very concerned about the environment and always have been. And we really believe that people that get into fly fishing are going to become ardent conservationists, and they're gonna fight for public lands. They're gonna fight for better clean water laws, clean air laws, because they're more in tune with the environment and they're enjoying it. So they're gonna fight for it because it's what they're passionate about. So, when you're developing a fly fisher, usually you're developing someone who's going to help protect our natural resources.
Yeah, love it. Okay, we got to circle back to the gear.
Yep. Okay.
Real quick, since we talked about the leaders anyhow.
Yep.
Explain, because this always messed me up. Can you explain? I know we've talked about the taper.
Yeah.
There's a point where the taper stops. And people hear this phrase a lot, and it's going to confuse a lot of people who are just getting into it, at least if they're anything like me. And admittedly, I'm easily confused. The tippet section.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay. So when you buy a machine-made leader, a knotless tapered leader, there is what's called a tippet on it. And all it is the last thin section. So when they make these, there's a fairly level, what's called the butt section. And then there is, in the middle of the leader, there's a transition where the diameter tapers down fairly rapidly. And then the tippet is the part that presents your fly. That's the skinniest part, right? But as you break off in a tree or a rock or a fish, or you tie on a new fly, you're gradually shortening this, because every time you tie a knot, you have to cut a little piece off, right?
Sure.
So eventually it gets too thick and it doesn't present well. It doesn't land on the water well. It doesn't float as well. So you have to attach your own tippet. And so what you do is you take a spool of basically fishing line.
Yep.
And you pull off, usually around 2 feet of it.
Okay.
And then you tie it back on. I got all bunged up here. What am I doing? How did that get in there? Anyway, you take a piece of this stuff of the right diameter.
Right.
And you tie it to that leader.
Yeah.
And then you've got a new tippet. So the tippet is just part of the leader. It's just the last piece.
On a new leader, if you're buying it right out of the pack, because they come in those little packages.
Yeah.
Does a new leader have a tippet
yes,
section
it's already included, so you can use that out of the package if you want. But again, eventually it's going to the leader's going to get shorter and thicker, and then you got to put a new piece on.
Yep.
Now you can get around that if you want. You as it gets too short, you can just spend another $5 and put on a new leader, but that's kind of silly.
Yeah.
It's not cost effective and it's wasteful.
Yeah.
And, it's not something you want to do. You could do it that way though.
Yeah, I've been lazy a couple times and done that. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, everybody does. And I know people who do it all the time, but again, it's wasteful and
Right.
and it doesn't take long to put on a new tippet.
Now, if you could show the Andy cam over there, the Tippet spool out there, you'll notice on it, it says, I mean, it does have a tensile strength to it as well.
Yep.
But when we talk about Tippet, we're typically talking in terms of numbers that conventional fishermen might not recognize. So normally it's like, oh, we use 10-pound tests for bass. We use 4-pound tests for trout.
Right.
Ours say, or ours as, fly anglers, right? 6X.
Yeah, 6X.
Now, what do those mean? Like, what does that mean? It pretty much goes from 8X all the way down to 1X.
Yeah.
So how does it work?
Well, it's an archaic designation, but we deal with diameter instead of pound test in fishing. That's just the way fly fishing works. The diameter that you have on the end is important. Whether you need a big heavy diameter for 150-pound tarpon, or you need a really thin diameter for fooling a trout with a little tiny dry fly. So we're talking diameters, and 6X is what is it? 5 thousandths of an inch. So rather than going, I need a new piece of 5 thousandths of an inch tippet, we just give all those diameters numbers.
Gotcha.
So it's shorthand, basically. It's confusing. I know it's confusing to a lot of people. Leaders are very confusing to people.
I will tell you what, more than the hatches, more than the flies themselves, more than the casting.
Yeah.
That leader just like bogged me down when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like such an obvious thing now, but like I really couldn't wrap my head around it.
I know,
at the time.
and I just don't think we've explained it well enough over the years, and I'm hoping that we're getting better at explaining this to someone who's just starting.
Yeah. So in the absolute simplest terms, a leader is a piece of monofilament line. I know it comes with fluorocarbon too, but we're just going to say mono.
Fishing line.
Yeah, it's a
fishing
piece
line, clear fishing line.
Even better. It's a piece of clear fishing line that connects your fly to the fly line.
Yep.
And from the fly line side, tapers down all the way until it gets to the tippet section. The tippet section comes on a new leader.
Yes.
As you tie on flies or get tangles or break them off in fish or whatever you do.
Yep.
That tippet section gets shorter.
Yep.
So you get these auxiliary spools of tippet that you can tie on to the end of your leader to rebuild that tippet section.
So it's back to where you started.
And you can use those leaders I know people who use the same leader an entire season.
Oh, I do for most of the time. Yeah, I just build, I might go to a bigger fly, a heavier fly, so I might cut it back.
Yeah.
So it's heavier and stronger if I'm fishing a big fly for big fish. And then when I want to go back to a smaller fly, I got to put a couple little intermediate sections in there. And, it's geeky and fussy, but it works.
Yeah. So, I mean, but another way that you're saving money, it's like you buy one piece of fishing line, basically. You buy one piece of fishing line, one fly line.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the reel. Let's talk about the thing that because we're going to save like the rod and the casting for last. That's going to be like the hook.
Okay. The reel, if you're fishing for small fish, sunfish or small bass, in fact, most bass and trout for the most part, the reel is a line storage device. You're not using the reel to reel the line in after every cast. You are manipulating the line with your hands. And that's why, fly fishing is less mechanical, because you're doing it all with your hands.
Yeah, you kind of hand line the fish.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, or when you move from spot to spot, then you reel up your line. But if you do happen to get a big fish, or you're fishing for something like steelhead or salmon that are going to pull a lot of line, it has a drag system just like,
that's a
big heavyweight saltwater steelhead salmon reel.
That's a steelhead reel.
And it has a drag on it. It has a disc drag so that it will apply tension on there to help tire the fish out. So, a lot of people say, You don't even need a reel for trout fishing. Well, there might be that one day when you hook a 20-inch brown trout in fast water that you're going to want that drag and that reel because he's going to go.
For sure.
And you're not going to stop him no matter what.
Yeah.
So, but it is, it is basically a line storage device. It's probably in trout fishing or in most freshwater fishing, it's the least important part of your tackle. But however, they are beautiful. They're a beautiful piece of machining. A lot of them are made in the United States. This one happens to be made in New Hampshire by a friend of mine who makes reels for Orvis. But they're beautiful. They're jewel-like things.
Yeah.
So you can buy a very functional, inexpensive reel. It'll work fine.
Yeah.
But there's kind of a pride of having a really nice reel on your rod.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. It's like, again, all about how you're sort of experiencing it, right? We were talking the other day, because of this show, I don't have as much time as I would like to be outside. Like, I in a typical year, I would spend nearly 60 nights, give or take, in a tent or like sleeping in my pickup.
Yeah.
Now that I'm a big boy and I'm doing this thing, I really don't have like that sort of flexibility anymore.
Yeah.
So what I did was I wanted to make like, the most out of what I could locally fly fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's all sorts of great stuff to do in Bozeman.
Yeah.
But, so I got like a vintage reel, a vintage Hardy reel, which is like super cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's just kind of the mentality in which you're making that purchase. If your goal is to have a fun pastime where you're just going out and, going over to the dog park that has some sunnies in it or whatever and doing a little fishing.
Yeah.
Get the line holder reel.
Yeah.
If you want it to be like, oh, I'm interested in the craft, I'm interested in like the thing, then it's like, yeah, grab a nice reel. Or if you're doing something that's pretty heavy as far as like technical needs.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked much about salt water, but saltwater fly fishing is a really fun thing to do, and it's totally different from most freshwater fishing. It's a whole different world, you know. And there, you need a muscular reel with a strong drag because those fish are stronger and they're going to go.
Yeah,
they're going to go, and you're not going to stop them.
Yeah,
they might go 100 yards before you can slow them down. So in some places you need to pay attention to the reel, but for a lot of freshwater fishing, you don't.
Okay. Let's move on to what should we do next, man? I guess the rod is sort of what's left, huh?
Yeah, the rod is sort of what's left.
And then we're going to get into the flies and the casting.
So the rod is long and skinny. And most of them these days are 4-piece. So that you can transport them easily, take them on a plane, stick them in your car, store them at home, whatever. And a 4-piece rod is every bit as good as a 2-piece or even a 1-piece. The ferrules are the thing that joins them together. And so you just seat these. There's little dots that you line up, and you just put the whole thing together. I've got a short rod here, so we can wave it around indoors.
That's a pretty rod.
This is a small stream trout rod.
3?
It is a 4-weight. Oh, we didn't talk about weights. We got to talk about weights.
We're about to.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a, fairly, this is a short fly rod, but it's fairly long and skinny.
Uh-huh.
And you put the reel on the rod. There's a thing called a reel seat. And you put that on, and it's got a screw locking device. Screw it down till it's tight. And then that's your outfit right there. Cool. And they're light, they weigh a couple 2-3 ounces. For the most part,
there is I mean, quite literally sometimes an aerospace component in the material engineering.
There definitely is. The carbon fiber that most rods are made out of these days is an aerospace fiber. So it's interesting because there's a lot of tech in these rods, and there are a lot of sophisticated machines to make these rods, yet there's a lot of hand labor as well. So 33 different people touched that rod before it left the rod shop. Yeah. And a bunch of machines.
How much does one of these weigh?
Oh,
Do you know?
that thing probably weighs, ounce and 3/4.
An ounce and 3/4.
Yeah. Yeah. The rod itself.
Yeah, yeah.
You put the reel on it.
Reel's heavier.
But yeah, I mean, typical trout rod these days weighs 2.5 ounces.
Really?
Yeah. So they're light, but they're very strong. And this is, the progression of what we've learned about how to make rods out of this graphite fiber. We've come a long way since the 70s when they first came out. But you can really reef on a fish without worrying about breaking that rod.
Oh yeah. Well, as producer Andrew found out the other day, the number one culprit to breaking rods is car doors.
Car doors, screen doors, ceiling fans, people stepping on them in a boat. Yeah. Yeah. That's how they break most of the time. They hardly ever break in fish.
Andrew, feel how light that rod is. Crazy, right?
Yeah. And that's a lightweight rod for small trout,
Sure.
right? It makes a little trout or a little sunfish feel like a whale. It's fun. It's fun.
So one of the things that we got to talk about is in the same way that we have 6X, 5X, whatever
Right.
on the Tippet.
Right.
These rods are also designated in a way that will be foreign if you're familiar with, again, spin fishing.
Yep.
You typically hear things like a medium action,
Yeah.
a light
Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
This one here says 4-weight.
Right.
What does that mean?
So there are various let me have the reel there.
There you
So
go.
there are various weights
I'm going to break this
of
down in
these.
half.
Yeah, there are various weights of these fly lines, and it's a weight in grains of the first 35 feet if you want to get geeky. And there's a standard that was established back in the 60s where a 4-weight or a 3-weight is supposed to weigh within this grain range. I mean, that's getting overly geeky.
Sure.
Nobody needs to know that.
Right.
But the thing is that there are fly lines from a size 1 to a size 14. As you go up in number, you go up in more mass, bigger diameter. And so let's take a 4-weight, which is a light trout line, something you'd use for trout, bluegills, small fish. And then you get up to
This is I think that's a 7.
yeah, you can see the difference.
Well, I'll tell you what, actually, hey, producer Andrew, up on top of that sound panel there's the reel that's about the size of the pocket watch. Grab that one, would you? Andrew is down from the chair. Everything is safe. So this is my small stream, like really, really tiny stream blue lining
yeah,
rig.
yeah,
So here we go. We can use these. That's a very stark contrast.
big
there.
difference.
So this one is a 2-weight and this one is a 7-weight, I think. I haven't used it in a very long time.
So the advantages of a lighter line is that they're more delicate.
Mm.
You can create less disturbance on the water with a lighter line. So it's for trout or fish that are fairly spooky, mostly trout.
Sure.
And then you get up to the point where you have to throw a bigger fly. So a bigger fly is more air resistant. You need more mass to drive that bigger fly. So if you're fishing in the ocean for striped bass or even tarpon or sharks or something like that, you need that mass to drive that bigger fly out there because they're not going to come up and eat a little tiny trout fly, right? They're going to eat something that's maybe this long.
Right.
So you need more mass to drive that bigger fly out there.
And that was another thing that I think is really important with the line. Again, is Oh wait, we did talk about this. Never mind. Ignore me. The fact that you're casting the line,
Yeah.
not the
Right.
not the fly.
Right.
Okay. Cool. So a 4-weight is basically just like an archaic. I mean, they match the line, right? So you would have a 7-weight line, and you fish that on a 7-weight rod.
Yeah.
You have a 4-weight line, you fish it on a 4-weight rod, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. The rod is made to bend in a particular way in your casting, and we haven't really talked about that. But when you fly cast, you're bending that rod and you're building up energy.
Sure.
Right? You're building up, I guess it's potential energy, and then when you finish your cast, that rod unbends, and it drives the fly line out there. The rod has to bend in a particular way in order to cast it well. If you put too heavy of a line on a rod, it's not going to go very far because you're bending the rod too much. If you put too light of a line on a rod, it's not going to bend at all or hardly at all. So it's not going to build up that energy.
Yeah. And, I think people a lot of times, and we'll get into this when we're talking about the casting dynamics, but wait, I'm sorry. To summarize the thing though, 4-weight is just like kind of an archaic thing that's just become another convention.
It's not really archaic. It's just a shorthand system.
Right.
Because, you don't want to say this is some people do. This is a 250 grain line, or this is a 300 grain line. 4-weight, 5-weight, 6-weight. It's a lot easier to remember. And
sure.
And so people want the universal rod. They say, "Oh, I want to go saltwater fishing and I want to fish for small stream trout." Well, that's like trying to play 18 holes of golf with one club, right?
Sure.
But there are rods that'll cross over. So like a 6-weight rod, kind of in the middle, you can fish for bass with that rod. You could do a little light, smaller saltwater fishing, or you can fish for trout with it. You're going to sacrifice a little delicacy for trout on the light end. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of power on the heavy end, but it'll do it all.
Right.
But it's compromise.
Sure.
So most people that do different types of fishing might have a couple rods. Not necessarily. If people are fishing for similar sized fish with similar sized flies, they only need one fly rod.
Right. One thing that I feel a lot of people, the biggest mistake that I see when people are learning to cast is they almost view it as like throwing a baseball, in that they're imparting a lot of force.
Right.
When it's really almost like, it's like not the same mechanic, but it's more like flicking something off of like a spoon at your brother at the dinner table.
Yes.
And so it's a lever, and it's supposed to, the power is mostly generated in the rod.
It is. Yeah.
It is not, pushing it. So I think that's like a super good thing to
if you try to muscle,
in
fact, if you try to muscle a fly cast to get a longer cast, it's often counterproductive.
Yeah.
So you're not throwing, the fly rod is really directing the line. And all you need to do is direct that tip of that rod to direct the line where you want it to go to build up that energy.
Okay.
So it's not, and it's two almost mirror image motions where you have what's called a back cast, which is where the line goes behind you, and then a forward cast, same motions with your hand, your shoulder, your forearm, your upper arm, your forearm, and your wrist, same motions. But on the forward cast, you just stop everything and then it falls to the water.
So let's use, this is just the top section of that rod that we were showing off earlier. Let's, if you can you demonstrate, I guess, sort of the basic mechanic of the of the cast?
We can actually put a line on it.
That'd be fun. Have you ever seen I think it's Flip Pallet who does it?
Yeah, Lefty Cray used to do it. Lefty Cray showing what a fly rod does. He would cast with a full fly rod, then he'd break it in half, and he'd cast with half a rod. And you notice that he's using a lot more of his body motion, right? And then he would just use the tip section to cast, and then he would throw the rod down and cast with his hand, just with his hands. So you can make a fly line go with just your hands, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And you got to have the hand-eye coordination of a lefty cray
Yeah.
to do it, which most mortals don't. Okay, so I've got a short little cast here. All right, get a little bit more aligned, and you start fairly low, and you won't be able to see this bend because it's not the full rod.
Sure.
But you throw the line in the air behind you, and you wait until it straightens, and then you just point the tip forward. So it's just like, and there's a real dead stop. There's a real dead stop, and as soon as the line straightens behind you, then you just flick it forward. And people worry too much. They say, you shouldn't use your wrist, you shouldn't use this and that. You don't worry too much. When you're learning, you shouldn't worry too much about what your wrist, what your shoulder, and everything else are doing. You worry about the tip of the rod directing the line up there and then pointing forward.
What was the old thing? It was like people used to put the
a
Bible
book
under their
like
under their
river
thing.
runs who put a Bible under your arm.
And the metronome 10 and 2.
No,
all that.
It should be a loose, relaxed motion. It has to be precise, and you have to develop muscle memory, but it should feel easy, and it will.
Right. Yeah.
It will feel easy once you've practiced, but people need to practice. The best caster in the world, best caster I know, Pete Kutzer, does the Orvis videos, practices almost every day. You and I think he's perfection, right?
Yeah.
Pete doesn't think he's perfection. He's practicing every single day
He
to
just
get
sees
better.
all the errors.
You're never going to master fly fishing ever. You're never going to master it. You're just going to get better and better and more comfortable with it, so you have more fun on the water, And it does take practice for sure.
One of the big hangups that I had, and I'm like over this now, but when you're first learning how to fly fish, you feel as if like this cast should have like a lot of effort, or like if you're just doing these really choppy things to get line out, you're somehow not casting right.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's kind of like what gets the fly out there.
Yep.
What like presents it in the way that you'd like it to.
Yep.
And then what's efficient, and if you're doing, in my mind, if you're doing all those things, you're doing great. You're doing exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah, and it's very telling when you're teaching like a 9-year-old kid and a 50-year-old man who's an executive, a type A person, and the kid listens to you and does what you tell him to do, and they pick it up like that.
Mm-hmm.
The 50-year-old is fighting it the whole way. He's trying to muscle it. He's trying to punch it. He's stiff, and and the kids are just I can do that.
Goes back and forth.
So yeah, it's very difficult for someone who has done a lot of spin fishing or bait casting, because it is a different casting motion.
Sure.
So those people can be really difficult to teach because they've developed muscle memory that's wrong for fly casting, and they have to rewire their brain.
Yeah. And one of the things too, I guess, with like the mechanics of the cast is the hardest thing, I think, for when I try and like teach people how to cast is that dead stop. And then because I guess that's why a lot of people muscle it when their line is like kind of not forming that loop and getting all over the place. What they want to do is they like try and speed it up because they're like, oh, well, I must like not be caught up to it. And it's the slowing it down and that stop, because that stop, when you bring it forward, it loads that line. Yep. And that's the whole.
The stop bends the rod, loads. Yeah, and that's a good example showing how the rod delivers the line.
Yeah, here, get in on this, Andrew. So when you make that stop, right, you're bringing this line back, you're stopping here, the line keeps traveling, and that weight of that line bends the rod, loads it up, and then so when you do your forward cast, it like propels it forward.
Yeah.
Dude, that is something that I struggle with still all the damn time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I will ever be able to cast a full line just because I can't help but start trying to muscle it every time.
You know what? And people want to be able to do this. I have been fly fishing for 60 years, I don't think I've ever cast a full fly line. 90 feet. Full fly line is 90 feet. I don't think I've ever done it. You would never need it in a fishing situation. Most fish are caught between 30 and 40 feet away.
Right.
In fly fishing, it's a game of accuracy, not distance. I mean, there are times when you wish you could cast 90 feet, but it's hard to set the hook. It's hard to control your fly. It's a game of, close in, intimate fishing for the most part.
Yeah. People need spots to practice, and sometimes like a water body is convenient. Maybe you're like a teenager who doesn't have their license yet. You can't go down to the pond.
Yeah.
Casting in a backyard, totally acceptable.
Yeah, totally acceptable. It can be you should avoid like gravel and concrete and stuff because that can affect the coating on your fly line and wear it out prematurely. But casting on grass, particularly wet grass, if you can just take a sprinkler or a hose and wet the grass down, yeah, perfectly fine if you don't have water to practice casting in your backyard or in a park. Yep.
Say I had a buddy like producer Andrew, who I'm going to force to fly fish at some point before this episode launches so we can prove how easy it actually is. Andrew, you've never, a little bit. Like, yeah, but not anything like, you wouldn't be like, I'm a fly fisherman.
No, I'm terrible. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I've cast a few times. I don't think I've ever caught anything.
When's the last time you've cast a fly rod? Like going out and you go
last year. Yeah. But it was, I went out once. It wasn't great. So
we're going to take Andrew out. We're going to do some fly fishing. He's going to catch some fish. Now that I say that, we're going to have like a really just up day. But we'll be doing that.
When let's say you've gotten a fly fishing outfit, you've done some casting, you're practicing, you've learned a couple knots, and you're ready to go fishing,
mm-hmm.
right? Don't go trout fishing for the most part. Don't try to have your first experience with trout because trout can be difficult.
Sure.
If you're going into a wilderness lake or a wilderness stream where the fish have never seen a fly, yeah, you could start out trout fishing. But most trout streams that people can get to these days, the fish, they've gotten kind of smart and they can be difficult.
They see a lot of other fishermen.
They see a lot of other anglers. They see a lot of flies. They've been caught and released, and it can be tough. And trout in general, are kind of tough. So what somebody should do is find the closest pond that has a bunch of panfish, sunfish. So bluegills, pumpkin seeds, crappie, shell crackers. There's different kinds of sunfish all around the country. Or small bass, little tiny bass, which is how I started in a pond that had a bunch of little bass, because they're agreeable. They're not scared easily. They'll take almost any fly, and you'll learn how to present the fly, how to play a fish, how to release a fish, and you'll have some success. This is really important with kids. The kids want instant action, and you don't want to take a kid trout fishing for the first time because they're going to get frustrated and they're going to get bored with it, and so will you. So you want to find a place with some easy fish. Sunfish, sometime between May and July is, in most parts of the country, they're in shallow water. You can see them. Go stand on a dock somewhere where you can see sunfish in the water and then try to catch them. Yellow perch, any small fish like that are fairly agreeable. So I wouldn't start out trout fishing unless you really want to. If you do, know that you're going to have some frustration at first.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Okay. Now I think the thing that everybody really expects us to talk about, the flies.
Yeah.
Flies are crazy. Well, flies are, first off, misnomers, right?
Yeah.
It's not, a lot of it is flies, but not all of it's flies. So why don't you, we got some fly boxes here. Let's, we can talk about them. Those two gray ones, they have like a mix of everything in there. So you can just open it up and,
yeah,
producer Andrew made us put the lav mics on because apparently we were moving around a little bit too much, and he's an audio stickler. That's what we pay him the big bucks for. Anyhow, Flies.
Yeah. So let's start out with the trout flies.
Okay.
And, you know, you can buy fly boxes if you want. You can also put them in a little container,
Sure.
pill box or whatever. You don't have to buy fly boxes.
Oh, dude, when I do like some mountain, like small stream stuff, I used to keep them in a chew tin.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cliche, but whatever. You know. Okay.
So, flies can float or they can sink, basically. And this one, and the ones that float, they look kind of fluffy. They look like if you threw them in a glass of water, they'd float, right?
We can do that right now.
Yeah. So there we go. It's floating. And then you also have subsurface flies. Most of the time they're called nymphs. And when you put them in the water, they're going to sink. So dry fly, wet fly, nymph, whatever, sinking fly, floating fly, of various types, sizes, colors. Sometimes the pattern, the exact fly pattern probably doesn't matter that much. People think there's a magic fly, but on any given day, there's dozens of flies that a trout will take, even if they're feeding, even if they're getting kind of fussy about their feeding.
When you say a fly pattern, what do you mean?
Well, it's a recipe.
Okay.
Basically a recipe. You put deer hair on the tail, muskrat fur on the body, chicken feathers for the hackle, and mallard for the wing. We use synthetic materials. We use natural materials to make flies. I'm a fly tyer. I love flies and I love playing around with flies. But so that's kind of, trout flies, and they range from little teeny tinies to fairly good sized.
Now, let me ask you this. When people tie their own flies,
Yep.
or they go to a fly shop,
Yep.
are those people typically making up the patterns as they go, or are there specific patterns that I know the answer to these questions, but that was one thing that confused me. I remember being a kid going to a fly shop being like, I want to tie my own flies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then being like, well, you should tie this fly. And I was like, what do you mean? And these patterns are, I'll just answer my own question here. They're standardized for the most part.
Yeah.
Unless you're into developing your own patterns, which is a pretty advanced thing to be doing.
Yep.
So describe that, I guess to me. Do you see any?
Well, when you go into a fly shop and you buy commercial flies, the recipes are standardized for the most part. And,
Sure.
A prince nymph in New Jersey is the same as a prince nymph in Colorado,
and
Montana,
a
whatever.
prince nymph.
Yeah, there's a prince nymph, beadhead prince nymph. So it's the same recipe. People will modify them a little bit and substitute, which is fine. But then you can also invent your own. Let's say you like the prince nymph, but you think maybe the wing cases should be purple instead of white. So if you tie your own flies, you just substitute that material.
Okay.
So you go off pattern, you go off recipe,
Okay, so let's talk about the anatomy of the flies.
Okay. Yeah.
This is definitely Andy Cam mode as we talk about this. You ready, Andrew? Okay.
So there's a fly called the Prince that was developed by a guy named Doug Prince in the I think in the 1960s from California, and people have modified it over the years. And there is a very popular fly that's called the fly formerly known as Prince.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's really
And
funny.
the guides in like Montana just call it a formerly.
Formerly?
Put on a formerly. Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so let's use that Adams fly.
Okay, which is this one here.
Right. Now, I guess because we've talked about sizes in tippet, lines, rods, let's talk about how fly sizes work. That's what, a size 12? Size 14 maybe?
14, yeah. It's a 14.
What does that mean?
That it means nothing. That is really archaic, and it means nothing other than it's a size 14 and it's about this long.
Okay.
All right. And then as the number gets higher, the flies get smaller. which is stupid and confusing. But
Well, it's kind of like shotguns, though.
yeah, again, it's archaic. So this is like a size, probably a 22, little tiny fly. And, you know, as much as we hate to put something like that on, there are times when trout are feeding on little tiny midges to the exclusion of everything else, and you got to go that small. We don't like to because they're hard to tie on, harder to hook fish, harder to hold fish. But sometimes, like yesterday, you know, I couldn't catch a fish on a bigger fly.
Now, this one is significantly bigger. How big? What size is that?
That's probably a size 6, I would say.
Size 6?
Yeah.
And so this must be for a really tiny fish, and this must be for a really big fish.
Not necessarily. It depends on what they're feeding on. You could catch a small fish on that, and you could catch a very large fish on that. Depends on what they're feeding on.
So those two flies, you catch the same fish?
Same fish, yeah. Different conditions, different fish, you know. There's so many variables in this, and you shouldn't get too overly concerned about it because you'll drive yourself nuts. There are a lot of variables. There's the weather, the water temperature, the fish's behavior, whether they've been scared or not. I mean, there's so many variables involved in this. You don't want to beat yourself up over it.
Okay. Now, what we have these two flies here. If we could go through and just, if you could tell me the parts of this fly, because you know, it is all based in, I always forget, it's entomology. I always forget entomology versus etymology.
Oh, entomology.
Yeah, so it's entomology. So these are biological terms, or for the most part. You kind of break it down the same way. So what are we looking at here? What are the parts of that fly?
Well, it's supposed to imitate some kind of bug that's sitting on top of the water. It's a dry fly. Could be a mayfly, could be a caddisfly. This particular fly doesn't imitate anything in particular, but it works. It's the most popular dry fly in the world. It's called an Adams, and it just works.
Okay.
Who knows why? We don't know. The trout like it.
Just looks buggy.
And it's made from the tails, which are the part sticking out in the end.
Here, wait. I got something perfect for you to point with. Use this.
Yeah. Okay. So the tails, this part here, are chicken feathers, just plain old chicken feathers. They're bred specifically for fly tying, not for meat, but they're chicken feathers. The body is traditionally and historically muskrat fur.
On that one in particular.
On that one in particular, yep. Okay. But a lot of people will use a synthetic dubbing. Yeah. It's just a fuzzy stuff that just spin on a hook. So you could either use a natural fur or you could use a synthetic fur, polypropylene, or I don't even know what fibers, nylon, I don't know what synthetic fibers are in there. And then the wings, which are the things, that little black and white things that stick up, those are chicken feathers from a Plymouth Rock chicken. And then the hackle, which is this fuzzy stuff that helps it float, that's also chicken feathers. So it's mostly a chicken feather fly. Then you get to, so here's a royal wolf.
And what's that imitate?
That imitates who knows what. Again, the fish like it. It's not specifically tied to imitate any particular bug, but it just works. It's been around for a long time. And interestingly enough, I cannot buy a fish on a royal wolf. It's one of the most popular flies. It never works for me. It just doesn't. And it's because I have no confidence in it, probably. And I don't like tying them because they're complicated. But it's a great fly, and people shouldn't be biased by my
disdain,
superstition, I should say. So this has got a bunch of different things in it. The tails are usually made of moose hair, moose mane, because it's stiff and it helps float the fly. And then there are 2 joints on that fly, and they're made from a peacock feather. We call it peacock herl. And then that little red band in the middle will either be thread or silk or nylon floss. So it's the red band in the middle of it. And then it has hackle, brown hackle in this case, just like the Adams, chicken feathers. And then the wings are either made from a synthetic fiber or often they're made from calf body hair.
Yeah, I think that one is real calf body.
Yeah, it looks like calf body hair. So it's a combination, and a lot of these flies are a combination of man-made materials, plastic materials, and natural materials.
Now these nymphs, they have the same parts too, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
so
the
you
same
have
parts.
like the tail, in that case it's goose bites.
Yeah.
You have the body, which is, is similar to the royal wolf,
Yeah,
the peacock herl.
Yeah.
You got wings, I guess in this case are also goose bites, just white.
Yep, they're from a goose feather. Yeah.
And then you got you got kind of like what people call a soft hackle, which is just that it's a less stiff version of this.
Yeah. This from a hen. It's from a hen chicken instead of a rooster.
Yeah. And that gives it a little bit of action in the water sometimes, or just makes it look kind of buggy.
Yep. And then there's a brass or tungsten bead at the head of it, and that serves a couple purposes. One is it's a nymph, so you're supposed to fish it under the water, helps it sink in the water, and it also adds some flash. It seems to attract fish. Do any bugs have a gold round head like that? No. Do the fish eat them? Yes. Do we know why? No. And we don't want to know why. It's one of those mysteries.
And the other thing that's cool is how these things, the proportions allow them to balance. So you're throwing this thing way out ahead of you with like a stick. It's not like you can be like, okay, I want it to land right side up. But I hope this is a good one, right? Yeah. Lands right side up. That kind of, is that because the hook works as that's kind of sitting low in the water.
Yeah, well,
isn't it?
they mostly do. They mostly do.
Yeah.
So it looks like a bug on the water.
Yeah.
And if you looked at that from 20 feet away, you'd think it was a bug on the water.
Sure.
And the trout don't see that well until it gets really, really close. So they think it's a bug on the water.
Sure. Now, we've talked about these things as imitating sort of general, general bugs.
Yeah.
But that tiny one that I dropped in the water, that imitates something specific for the most part, like a little cream midge or something like that.
A little tiny midge.
And a midge, for those listening who might not be familiar, it's just basically a gnat. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's a true fly. It's a two-winged fly. It's, the same order as I think mosquitoes, houseflies. I might be wrong on my entomology, but anyway, it's a little gnat that doesn't bite.
Okay.
And you see them buzzing over the water. And sometimes the fish, if there are a lot of them around, sometimes the fish will only eat those little midges.
Sure. But that's imitating something specific, right? So
yeah, that's imitating something specific.
That's where we get into things like you could always throw an attractor, which is what we call something that's kind of non-specific, right? That does the but this. I can hand that to you, and more or less what that is.
Yeah, that is a comparadon, and that is specifically designed to imitate a mayfly that's about a size 16 with a yellowish body and a brownish gray wing. So that's a specific imitation. However, we think that the fish are taking it because we see these flies on the water that look like that, so we throw that out there. The fish might think it's something else.
Right.
Right. I mean, they might think it's a caddisfly or a beetle or something else.
Moth that fell.
Yeah, I mean, we're arrogant and we think, we caught a fish on a mayfly imitation, so they must be eating mayflies. But are they? Who knows?
Now, what? But that is a good point, because I'm sure people are going, okay, well, I have a general idea. In trout fishing specifically, and this is kind of one of the other things that makes trout fishing hard, right? You hear a term a lot, matching the hatch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My personal advice is somebody just trying to catch their first trout. It's just fish pheasant tail nymphs until you catch something, and then But I'm sure people are kind of curious about when you might decide to use that one specifically. Can you describe what a hatch is?
Yeah, a hatch is when these mayflies live underwater for about 12 months as a larva under rocks. Yeah, they're living underwater. They're crawling around on rocks. And then all at once, when the water temperature gets just right or the photoperiod is right, they hatch, and they hatch into adults like a caterpillar coming into a butterfly. So they change their shape, and then they become a terrestrial organism, only to mate and die. They don't even feed when they're adults. But they all hatch at once, and they hatch in the water. They come up to the surface of the water and they dry their wings and ride the water for a while and they fly away. So that's what a hatch is, and it usually happens a lot of them at once. So, you might be fishing and you're not catching anything. You might see a few fish rise. You think, what's going on here? I can't catch them on this, prince nymph. So you look down at the water and you say, there's some, yellowish colored flies about that size. So you put on a
yellowish color fly about that size.
And you throw it out there and you try to make it drift as naturally as possible, and maybe you'll catch a fish.
Okay.
Maybe not.
So two terms that we've used drift.
Yeah.
And we've used rise.
Yes.
What is a rise, and what do you mean by a natural drift?
Okay, a rise is when a fish, mostly trout, but can be other things, takes something off the surface of the water. So it could be a carp eating a mulberry. It could be a tarpon eating a worm that's swimming just under the surface. But it's a break in the surface, and it's fairly obvious that there's a fish there and it's feeding. So we like that, right? Because we know they're there, we know they're feeding, so we know there's a chance of catching them. That's a rise.
Okay,
they're breaking the surface somehow. What was the other thing?
And a natural drift in relation to...
Oh, natural drift. Yeah, so these things, when they hatch, they don't motorboat across the water. They just drift with the bubbles and the debris that's in the water. And the trout pick these things out from all the sticks and twigs and milkweed fluff and everything else that's floating on the surface of the water. They pick that out because it's food and it's got some calories to it. And you want this thing to look like what they're eating. You don't want it to be, because you're connected to this fly. You got to put it out there somehow. You got to work your angles so that this thing will drift down in the water without waking across the surface.
Right.
Not that won't catch fish sometimes, but usually it does.
You just don't want it to look like it's attached to anything.
Yeah,
basically.
you don't want it to look like it's attached to anything. There's lots and lots of ways to do that. And sometimes it can be fairly complex and difficult, but that's the challenge of, that's why trout fishing is often kind of difficult.
Sure. Okay, cool. I think we've covered dry flies and hatches pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about just nymphing real quick, because that, I feel like that and streamers are probably, and I say streamers get as complicated as you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
But it's a really good way for, say you got a park pond and you have like a tiny little streamer and you want to catch some sunnies. That's a really good way to do it.
Yeah.
But nymphs, that is how a lot of people start catching trout. That's how I caught my first trout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you go about presenting or casting a nymph or fishing with a nymph? The dry flies are pretty, at least theoretically, easy. You see a fish rising, breaking the surface. You cast in front of it. It drifts down. Hopefully the fish eats it and you're stoked.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about a nymph? How does that work? How do you know when a fish bites that?
Well, some people watch the line. So they throw this thing out there and it sinks, goes underwater. And trout will often feed fairly close to the bottom because the current's less there and they can hang out there and feed. They don't swim around a lot. They stay in one place and feed from the drift. So that's their buffet line. That's like one of these sushi bars that goes around and you pick stuff that you want as it comes by. The trout are the same way. They're just waiting for the right food and then they tip up and
they're basically just sitting on a conveyor belt.
Sitting on a conveyor belt. Yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of ways you can fish a nymph. You can get away with more fishing a nymph. So you can try to make it what we call a dead drift or a natural drift, just as you would for a dry fly. And so it's just floating in the current. But some of these things can swim a little bit. And so sometimes you can just throw it in the water and let the line kind of tighten and the fish will hook themselves. Yeah. Or you can actually strip them. You can actually make them move through the water. But to get that dead drift, probably the easiest, and I know she picked that up because we're going to talk about that. Probably the easiest way to fish a nymph is to use what's called a strike indicator.
A bobber.
A bobber. Fly fishers don't like that term, but it is a bobber.
But I mean, that's like so perfect for what we're talking about, man.
Yeah.
Like that is a perfect example of how
fly fishing gets sold to people as being overly complicated. When you're calling a bobber a strike indicator.
Yeah, right.
You know, is it?
I mean, I went to a hardware store once and bought a bunch of those red and white sunfish bobbers that you fish worms with, and I put them on my leader and fished nymphs with them, caught fish all day long with a real bobber. So this is just a more sophisticated bobber, and there's a little slot in there, and you screw it down, and it's foam, so it floats, and then you just put it on your leader, and then you watch this thing bobbing down the current, and when it darts forward or when it goes under, you set the hook.
Yeah, setting the hook with a fly rod, just like explain to an alien what setting the hook is.
Move the rod enough to tighten the line.
Yeah,
that's all you want to do, and usually just lifting it straight up when you're trout fishing, just lifting it straight up until the line tightens is what you do. And it takes some practice and takes some practice developing that reflex, because unlike bait fishing, trout don't hold on to a fly very long because they take it in and they realize it doesn't feel like what it's supposed to, and they spit it right out.
Yeah.
So you have to strike fairly quickly. You can't let them. You can't be lazy about that. You can't be complacent.
It's kind of like when you're eating duck and you get a pellet.
Yeah. You want to get it right out of there. That's an easy way to start, and often one of the easiest ways to catch trout, if you want to catch some trout and you don't know much about this stuff, is to hire a guide and go on a float trip in a drift boat or a raft.
Yeah.
And the guide can manipulate you. All you have to do is get your line in the water.
Yeah.
Basically. You don't even have to be able to cast very well. And the guide, with a good guide on the oars, can actually manipulate your bobber and your nymphs to get them to drift properly.
That's funny.
And they're good at it. A lot of us kind of think it's boring.
Sure.
Because you're watching a bobber all day long and you're not really doing much. But it works.
Yeah.
Very effective. And it's a good way to start out.
Oh, dude, I owe a lot of fish to bobbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see you have some other flies here.
Yeah,
that are kind of more unique.
Yeah, so something that we talked about in the beginning is that it's not just imitating bugs, right? This is a streamer fly. And it wiggles in the water, and it darts through the water, and it's bigger. And this could be used in freshwater or in saltwater for big fish. Sometimes you can use the same flies in freshwater, saltwater, for bass, for trout, whatever. But it imitates some sort of larger prey. Most people think they imitate bait fish. Mm-hmm. So any minnows, sculpins, which is a kind of bait fish that's very common in trout streams. They live in the bottom. They don't swim very well. But this could also imitate a big leech, maybe. Mm-hmm. It could imitate a crayfish darting through the water.
Sure.
Who knows? It's a lure. Basically, it's like when you throw a Mep spinner out there for trout, that doesn't look like anything.
No, it's just like
It doesn't look like anything that they eat, but they eat it out of a kind of a reaction strike. It looks like food, looks like something edible, and they eat it. So streamers are the same way, and they can be pretty subtle with natural materials. This has rabbit fur and deer hair on it, but they can also be, really friggin' flashy. This is called acrylics. And what does that imitate? Probably a minnow, because it's got the bright flashy stuff, but who knows? Who knows what fish take it for, but they eat it. And these things you're manipulating, unlike dry flies and nymphs where you're trying to get a natural drift. These you're actually pulling them. You're stripping them through the water to make them dart through the water. Mm-hmm. So it's more active. It's generally easier because you don't have to worry about getting a natural drift. You can throw them at any angle to the current you want, and they'll probably work if the fish are into eating something bigger. And again, in salt water, this is basically what you fish is some sort of streamer or shrimp imitation or crab imitation. Bass these flies will all catch bass, trout, bonefish, small tarpon. They'll catch almost anything because most fish eat bait fish that we're looking for. And then you get, and you can get really crazy. This is a thing called a game changer, which has got a jointed body and almost looks like a spinning lure.
Yeah.
And these I tie in white. And then if I notice a particular color of bait fish, I'll take some waterproof markers and mark this thing to give it the coloration of what the fish are eating. Does it matter? I don't know. Who knows? But it's fun. And then, there's
This is my favorite.
Yeah, there's mice. There's mice. Fish eat mice. Mouse falls in the water. It's swimming from one bank to another. Big trout, bass, sometimes even tarpon have been known to eat mice. But this is made from deer hair. It's actually spun around the hook, and the tail is a little piece of cotton chenille, so a little tail, and then just little plastic eyes you can put on there, and whiskers. Do you need all that stuff? No.
Is it fun?
Probably not, but they're fun to tie and they're cool to look at. Right?
I think you're the only person I've ever heard say spun deer hair is fun to tie.
Oh, I enjoy it. Yeah, and you have to trim it with a razor blade and scissors, but it floats really well. And you could do the same thing with plastic or foam, but I don't think it often doesn't work as well for whatever reason. So anyway, but they're fun to make. Okay. And they're expensive to buy because there's a lot of labor involved in one of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. And same with some of those street. I mean, you start getting things like that, or like the really big, like crazy articulated, like those are pricey. Definitely pricey. Okay, I think that's a really great comprehensive fly overview.
Yeah, and flies can be 8 inches long for like sailfish or muskies. Yeah. Flies can be big, and there you need a big rod, heavy line, and they're not fun to cast.
No,
that's pretty physical.
No,
that's pretty physical fishing. But these things, for the most part, are very easy to cast.
I don't like the dumbbell eye casting. I've hit myself in the back of the head with those. It hurts.
They're dangerous. You want to always make sure when you're fly fishing that you wear a hat and sunglasses. If a fly hits your eye in the wrong place, you could be blinded. And you may think you have control of your own cast, but if you're fishing with somebody else in a boat, those things are whipping by at pretty high speed. So you always need to have some sort of protective glasses on.
Sure.
And a hat helps, just because you don't want to get a fly stuck in your head.
Sure. Okie doke. So we've gone over the gear. We've gone over barriers to entry. We've gone over the flies. We've gone over types of fish that you can catch. Say somebody is thoroughly convinced that they want to get into fly fishing. What is your most important advice for that person as far as, making sure that the experience is enjoyable, that they get something out of it, even if they might not be catching fish, for the first couple times?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, don't take it too seriously, because this is something that's supposed to be fun. Yeah. You never need to go fly fishing, right? Well, you might for your mental health, but don't take it too seriously, and you're going to have frustrations. I still have frustrations after a long lifetime of fly fishing. I have days when I get caught in the trees all the time, and I can't tie a knot, and I tangle the line around my feet, and I feel like a complete asshole. And I come back and I tell my wife, I should find something else to do with my life. I can't do this. So, take it easy and make sure it's enjoyable. And you're going to have frustrations. Those will become less frequent as you develop the muscle memory and as you learn more. But it's a learning curve. It's not insurmountable, and it's not that difficult, but you're going to have those days. So, don't worry about it.
For me, when I was learning, I always felt like some other fishermen. Now when I see people on the river, like, I'm very stoked to talk to them. And sometimes like if I can tell somebody's like trying to just like fish, I just leave them alone.
Yeah.
You know, I'll wave or say hi or something. But if
Yeah.
somebody's like kind of friendly, you can tell by the body language when somebody wants to be approached versus when they don't, right?
Yeah.
But I was always afraid that for some reason I was going to get yelled at by somebody.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and I don't think that that's an uncommon kind of thing. I feel.
Yeah, I mean, even going into a fly shop to buy your first rod can be intimidating. But luckily these days, you know, in the old days, fly shop, you walk in there and sometimes people would barely acknowledge you, and there'd be a bunch of bros hanging out at the counter and talking and not even, you know, acknowledging your existence on the earth. Nowadays, it's a lot more welcoming and a lot more friendly. And the fly shops that weren't that way aren't in business anymore,
right,
for a reason, right? So, fly shops are the backbone of this world, and they're going to be helpful. They're going to suggest flies. They're going to help you pick a rod. They're going to help you pick a leader and all that stuff. So, yeah, go with a buddy. You know, go with a buddy that's maybe at your level or a little bit more advanced, and that takes some of the intimidation out of it. Particularly women. You know, women are reluctant to go alone on a trout stream in the woods for obvious reasons. Go with a buddy, or if you're not going with a buddy, if you can't find someone, then go someplace where there isn't anybody else. You know, where you're not going to worry about doing something stupid and with somebody watching you and laughing at you or whatever. Just, you know, you'll have better fishing if you stay away from other people anyways. Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, it should be more of a solitary sport. I mean, you go with a friend, and you chat like we did yesterday. We stayed within earshot for the most part, which is something I rarely do.
I almost never do that.
But it was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun. But, and then you go off your own direction, then you come back and you chat, and then you go off in your own direction. Do it however you want. But, you know, stay away from other people because for one thing, it's rude. To walk into a pool. It's rude to walk into a pool where somebody else is fishing because most of these fish are spooky. They can get scared very easily. When they're scared, they don't eat. Mm-hmm. So don't walk into a pool where a whole bunch of people are fishing for a couple of reasons. One is it's rude and arrogant. And two is that the fishing might not be as good as if you can go find some place where there isn't anybody around because the fish haven't been scared yet.
Yeah. If that dude's caught 5 fish.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like just trying to get that last one. You go, oh man, this guy's like fishing real hard. There must be a bunch of fish in this pool. It's like, yeah, but like aside from this one that he's working, like everything downstream is blown out.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
What are some inadvertent mistakes that a beginner might make that would be kind of like faux pas? Like, because there are things that you can do. Like for instance,
faux pas,
walking like high holding somebody by accident, not knowing what you're doing. You know?
Yeah, you don't want to get in close to anybody else. You want to give an angler a lot of room. Personally, I don't like to see anybody, so I'll keep walking until I don't see anybody. I'm not social on when I'm fishing at all.
Yeah,
unless I'm with a buddy. I'm not social at all. I'll say good morning or how you doing and keep on going, but I don't stop and chat with people,
right?
Because I'm not there to chat.
Yeah, you're there to fish.
I'm there to fish and lose sight of the world. So that's probably the worst faux pas. I mean, getting tangled is not really a faux pas. Everybody gets tangled. Right. You think that people are going to laugh at me because I'm tangled. Well, yeah. Maybe playing a fish too long. Because most of the fish that we fish for, we're not going to eat them, right? We're going to release them. Mm-hmm. Most of them. If you want to keep fish and eat them, fine.
Yeah.
If it's legal.
Yeah.
But people play fish too long. They don't realize the strength of their tackle. And you tire them out too much to the point where they might not even survive after you release them. So, put the boots to them. Get them in quick. I know that you anticipated catching your first trout and you're really excited and you want to play them and show people as long as you can. Don't do that. Get them in quick. That shows you're a more accomplished angler and it shows you care more about the resource. and then go and catch another one.
Yeah. Don't bring Bluetooth speakers with you.
Don't bring
Dude.
Bluetooth speakers with you. Yeah.
I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that all the time now.
Yeah.
It's particularly on drift boats.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kills me.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's not the part of the experience that most people, and I don't want to hear somebody else's taste
Yeah.
in music anyways, because it's usually shitty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
right?
yeah. I mean, there's a reason that Justin Bieber outperforms Radiohead like 1,000 to 1, right? On
Yeah.
like, as far as like the charts go. Okay. I think that's like, there are not a lot of things you can do on a stream that are going to make people really upset.
Yeah.
If you're just trying to learn and like minding your own business.
Yeah.
What if you're walking to a spot and you see somebody and you go, okay, I'm going to walk past them.
Yeah.
And you notice that dude's catching, some fish.
Yep.
Obviously, you don't go and fish on top of him.
Right.
Anything wrong with asking him, hey, like, what are you using?
No, some people won't tell you, and
Yeah.
some people might not be very friendly, and some people will wade into shore and give you a couple
Yep.
of the flies. It all depends. You have to kind of read their body language.
It's kind of,
If they turn around and smile and wave, then it's good idea that maybe they'll tell you what fly they're using. But if they just hunch down and pretend you're not there, then I just keep going.
I tell people sometimes that it's like bartenders. They're the bartender that's going to like, basically stand across from you while they're doing dishes, and they'll talk with you and they'll bullshit about all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And they're the bartenders who just want to do their job and leave.
Right,
And it's like,
yeah.
if you keep trying to talk to that person, number one, your drinks are going to get weaker and weaker. But number two, you're just not going to have a good conversation. It's just
Yeah.
like, it's read the room.
Yeah, you got to read the room.
Cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure. I've told you this. Your podcast was the first podcast that I ever listened to. The first podcast that I ever downloaded was the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing podcast. Been running for 15 years. What are you on your like fourth theme song now?
I'm about to change it.
Are you?
Yeah.
I love the vintage one. I like down and down, 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 down.
Yeah, I'm about to
down,
change.
down,
It's
down.
going to be a little more bluegrass.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
I like
it's
it.
a friend of mine, Daniel Kimbrough, is a brilliant musician. I think he plays double bass and a number of other instruments, but he has a new album out, and he's a good fishing buddy. And there's one song that I really want to put on my
Love it.
podcast for the theme.
One more time, real quick. I know we covered a little bit of it. Tell people about the free fly fishing orientation classes.
Yeah.
Tell people about the Learning Center,
Mm-hmm.
and tell people about some of the stuff that you're doing as far as, some upcoming events, maybe some, I don't know, you wrote the book on a lot of this stuff, or a book at least on a lot of this stuff. Tell them where they can find some of your books and all that stuff, man.
Well, I can find my books wherever you find books. Yeah. Amazon. Hopefully you go to your local bookstore and they have them. That I prefer that people buy them there, but they often don't have them. So you gotta go online. The Learning Center is howtoflyfish.orvis.com.
Okay.
But if you just Google or search Orvis Learning Center, it'll pop up.
And they have everything from really basic instruction, like what we were kind of talking about,
Yeah.
all the way up to like
all the way up to
fanciest spake.
bonefish
Yeah.
and fishing for bass and fishing in salt water. Yeah, and it's all video based. And if you struggle with those knots, there's some animated knots. They're both animated, and there's a video of someone actually tying the knot, so you can learn it both ways. You
Cool.
can practice. And there's fly tying videos on there. All my podcasts are on there. People want to find them there. They can find them on the Learning Center. So there's no ads, not like YouTube. There's no ads, and it's totally free.
Awesome.
So it's a good resource for people that are starting out.
One quick note on the fly tying thing. Fly tying will not save you money. Again,
No.
fly tying will not save you money.
But it adds in so much enrichment to fly fishing,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Where are some places that you're going this year with these hosted trips?
I'm going to Iceland, which I've never been to, in July.
Were you fishing like dollies and stuff?
Arctic char, Atlantic salmon, brown trout, sea run brown trout, depending on what's in the river at
So
that
everything
time.
but dollies.
Well, Arctic char and dollies are
6 of one, half dozen.
Yeah, they're kind of close. And then I have a trip to Spain, trout fishing in the Pyrenees.
Super cool.
In September. And I have a Bahamas trip next, I think it's next April. Going to go to 2 lodges in the Bahamas. And then I have a couple trips to Patagonia, to Chile.
These are all trips you're hosting.
Yeah, trips I'm hosting.
Where can people find information on that? Should
On
they?
the Orvis website.
Orvis website is just right there. Pretty easy to find.
Yeah, trips and schools.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, if I can.
Yeah.
If there is anything that we haven't covered today that you go, man, I really wish Hayden asked Tom this.
Yeah.
You can ask Tom this. You can find his stuff at the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing podcast.
The Orvis Fly Fishing podcast.
Oh,
It used to be the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing. Now it's just because people thought the podcast was only for guides.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I changed it to just the Orvis Fly Fishing
Cool.
podcast.
The Orvis
Yeah.
Fly Fishing podcast. You can submit your own questions if they get selected, and a lot of them do. If it's a thoughtful, good, don't be like, what do I fish when I go to here? Like, because there are better ways to find that out. Tom answers all sorts of questions in a segment at the top called the Fly Box.
And nothing is too basic.
No.
People shouldn't be intimidated. Nothing is too basic, and I pick questions that I think will help other people who are listening to it. So,
I can't tell you how much stuff I learned from that podcast. Really
amazing.
And then, sorry, there was one more thing that you said that we should hit on.
Yeah, one of the things, when you first start out, you want a fishing buddy, or you want somebody to help learn with, or you want to go somewhere where people will be helpful. And clubs like Trout Unlimited clubs or IFF, International Fly Fishers. I think that's what it used to be, Federation of Fly Fishers, or other types of fly fishing clubs. You get to meet people. You probably get invited on trips. You'll get tips, and you develop a fishing buddy. You can do it on social media too, but that's a little iffy. You can find a fishing buddy on social media, but that's like online dating. And,
I've gotten really good people who I've gone fishing with. I've also had some nightmare experiences doing that.
You're going to try to vet them. You want to talk to them over the phone or on a video conversation. But yeah, you find a fishing buddy because it'll add something to it. Even if, like you and me, you don't fish together, but you go together, and it makes it enjoyable.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you so much. Really, like it's funny, but you kept saying when I asked you on here, "Are you sure you want me?" This is like you've got like astronauts and this.
Yeah, astronauts and people that jump off cliffs and paleontologists, and you want somebody boring like me? I haven't done anything that interesting in my life.
This is the podcast that I've been most excited for because. I'm
flattered.
I admire you a whole bunch, man, and I really do appreciate what you do for the fly fishing community. And I think you guide it with a gentle and steady hand, and I like it a lot, man. And spend some time with you the last couple days. That was really wonderful.
It's been fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad you talked me into coming out.
Next time you're in Montana, we'll do something.
I'm up for that.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you.